The flight attendants barely noticed her in seat 14C, just another passenger on the late-night run to D.C. But in the cockpit, everything changed when a voice cracked through the radio static. 2 words, impossible words. Reaper 1. The captain froze, color draining from his face as he frantically replayed the transmission. The voice belonged to someone officially declared dead 6 years ago in Afghanistan, someone he'd identified personally. His hands trembled as he scanned the passenger manifest, then looked down the cabin aisle. There she was, staring directly back at him, the ghost he never thought he'd see again. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of hidden truths and impossible reunions resonate with you, consider subscribing for more moments when the past refuses to stay buried. Dulles International Airport, buzzed with the usual evening chaos of travelers rushing to make connections, while others moved at the resigned pace of those with time to spare. At Gate 37, Flight 1726 to D.C. was preparing for boarding, a routine late-night run that Captain Thaddeus Harrington had flown countless times before. In the cockpit, Captain Harrington methodically worked through the pre-flight checklist, his movements precise and practiced after 25 years as a commercial pilot. First Officer Ellis prepared the navigation systems beside him, occasionally glancing at the captain's right hand, which seemed to hesitate slightly over certain controls. "Another migraine, Captain?" Ellis asked casually, noting the subtle tension in Harrington's face. "Nothing serious. Let us focus on pre-flight," Harrington replied, deflecting the concern with the ease of someone accustomed to maintaining professional composure, regardless of circumstances. The boarding process began with its usual efficiency. Flight attendant Zephyr Kearney greeted passengers at the door with practiced warmth, directing them to their assigned seats. Captain Harrington stood at the cockpit doorway, observing the boarding as he always did, a routine habit that helped him feel connected to each flight. Midway through boarding, a woman took her place in seat 14C with minimal fuss. She carried a single small bag that she stowed efficiently before settling into the window seat. Nothing about her appearance drew particular attention, mid-30s, hair pulled back neatly, wearing simple business attire that blended perfectly with the dozens of other professionals on the evening flight. As she arranged her belongings, the sleeve of her blouse shifted slightly, revealing a small scar at her wrist. The mark was barely noticeable, the kind of detail that would be overlooked by anyone not specifically looking for it. Captain Harrington's gaze passed over her, just as it did all other passengers, registering nothing unusual before he returned to the cockpit to complete his preparations. The pre-flight routine continued with standard announcements and safety demonstrations. The passenger in 14C neither paid particular attention nor completely ignored them, her behavior as unmemorable as her appearance. When Zephyr offered pre-flight beverages, she declined politely but minimally, her voice just another in the chorus of passenger interactions. "Weather looks good all the way to D.C., folks," Captain Harrington announced over the intercom, his voice carrying the confident reassurance that experienced pilots develop. "Expecting a smooth flight tonight." Takeoff proceeded without incident, the aircraft climbing smoothly through the evening sky. In the cockpit, Captain Harrington operated with his usual precision, while First Officer Ellis handled communications. The radio channels were unusually quiet, a detail Ellis commented on casually. "Quieter than usual tonight," he observed. "Quiet is good in our business," Harrington replied, though something in his tone suggested he found the silence somewhat unsettling rather than comforting. In seat 14C, the passenger sat motionless, neither reading nor sleeping nor engaging with entertainment. Unlike most travelers who settled into routines of distraction, she simply watched the horizon through her window, her stillness a subtle contrast to the casual movements of those around her. When the flight encountered minor turbulence, unexpected given the clear weather reports, Captain Harrington handled it with expertise but with a tension that seemed disproportionate to the mild disruption. His hands tightened visibly on the controls, and he checked the radar repeatedly despite consistent clear readings. During beverage service, Zephyr noticed that the passenger in 14C had not touched her drink. "Everything all right with your drink, ma'am?" she asked, the standard check-in with a hint of genuine concern. "Just waiting," the passenger responded, the cryptic reply delivered so casually that Zephyr almost did not register its oddness until she had moved several rows further. In the cockpit, Captain Harrington's behavior grew increasingly unusual. He checked systems that were functioning normally, took manual control more frequently than necessary, and occasionally rubbed his temple as if fighting either stress or pain. "Want me to take controls for a bit, sir?" Ellis offered, noticing the captain's discomfort. "I have got it," Harrington responded with uncharacteristic curtness, adding to Ellis's confusion. As the flight progressed, subtle details about the passenger in 14C became more noticeable to those paying attention. While appearing relaxed, her eyes constantly moved, assessing the cabin with methodical thoroughness. When Zephyr passed by again, the passenger asked a question that seemed innocent but carried an unexpected weight. "How long has Captain Harrington been flying this route?" Zephyr paused, surprised that the passenger knew the captain's name, which had not been mentioned in any announcements. "I am not sure, actually. He has been with the airline forever." The weather ahead showed signs of developing into a system that would require a course adjustment, nothing dangerous but enough to warrant a standard deviation. Captain Harrington's reaction, however, was far more agitated than the situation called for. "Standard deviation would only add 5 minutes, sir," Ellis pointed out reasonably. "We maintain course," Harrington insisted, his attention repeatedly drawn to the overhead panel where a communication system activity light blinked intermittently. In seat 14C, the passenger's focus shifted subtly toward the cockpit door, her previously casual observation becoming more directed, more intent. The change was so slight that no other passengers noticed, but it marked a clear shift in her awareness of the flight's progress. During a routine radio check, a burst of static interrupted the normal exchange. Through the interference, 2 words became barely audible. "Reaper 1. Captain Harrington froze completely, color draining from his face. His hand jerked toward the playback control, trembling visibly as he rewound the transmission. "Sir, what was that?" Ellis asked, confusion evident in his voice. "That is not possible," Harrington whispered, playing the transmission again. The same 2 words emerged from the static, unmistakable despite the interference. Harrington turned suddenly to look down the aircraft aisle, his eyes scanning the passengers until they locked onto seat 14C. The passenger met his gaze directly, her expression revealing nothing, yet somehow communicating everything. For a moment, they stared at each other across the length of the cabin, recognition dawning in the captain's eyes, while the passengers remained steady and unreadable. Captain Harrington locked the cockpit door abruptly, startling First Officer Ellis with the unexpected action. His movements had transformed from methodical to urgent, tension radiating from his suddenly rigid posture. "Security Protocol Alpha," he declared, voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Ellis blinked in confusion. "That is for terrorist threats, sir. There is no indication of—" "Just follow protocol," Harrington interrupted sharply, his attention fixed on the cabin camera feed focused on the passenger in seat 14C. She remained seated calmly, making no unusual movements, appearing no different from any other passenger except for the captain's intense focus on her. Outside the cockpit, Zephyr noticed the captain's uncharacteristic behavior through the small window in the cockpit door. She hesitated near the galley, sensing something was wrong, but unsure how to proceed without causing unnecessary alarm among the passengers. Inside the cockpit, Captain Harrington replayed the transmission repeatedly, his agitation growing with each listening. "This frequency is secure, military grade. No civilian should have access," he muttered, more to himself than to Ellis. Ellis's concern about the captain's stability increased with each passing moment. "Sir, I need to understand what Reaper 1 means if it is a security issue." Harrington paused the recording, his response carrying a weight that transformed the atmosphere in the cockpit. "It is not a what, it is a who, someone who died 6 years ago." Before Ellis could process this cryptic statement, the aircraft communication system indicated another incoming transmission on the same unusual frequency. The tension in the cockpit escalated immediately. In the main cabin, the passenger in 14C requested water from a passing flight attendant. When the glass arrived, she placed it on her tray table without drinking, using her finger to trace patterns in the condensation that formed on the outside of the glass. The movements appeared casual, almost absent-minded, but created what looked like coordinate numbers that she wiped away immediately when Zephyr passed by again. Other passengers had begun to notice her unusual behavior. A businessman seated across the aisle watched with growing suspicion, his hand hovering near the flight attendant call button. In the cockpit, a second transmission cut through the static. Verification protocol Sierra Tango 7. Harrington responded automatically with a counter code before catching himself mid-transmission, horrified at his instinctive reaction. Ellis stared at him in alarm. "Sir, what are you doing? That is not standard communication." "Passenger in 14C, Harrington demanded, ignoring Ellis's question. "What is the name?" Ellis checked the flight manifest quickly. "Meridian, Lyra Meridian, no special status indicated." "That is not her real name," Harrington whispered, certainty replacing confusion in his voice. The situation escalated as the captain adjusted their flight path without explanation, a subtle deviation that would not be noticed by passengers but represented a significant protocol violation. Ellis's concern transformed into alarm as Harrington continued to operate outside standard procedures. "Sir, we need to notify air traffic control about course changes," he insisted. "Negative. Maintain radio silence except emergency channel," Harrington ordered, his attention never leaving the cabin monitor showing seats at 14C. The irregular flight pattern had not gone unnoticed by ground control. The radio crackled with an incoming message. "Flight 1726, please verify course correction reason." Harrington ignored the communication, instead summoning Zephyr to the cockpit via a coded call button. When she arrived, he gave her unusual instructions. "I need you to observe the passenger in 14C. Note everything she does. Do not engage directly. Report any communication attempts." Zephyr's confusion was evident, but she complied with the captain's orders, returning to the cabin with new awareness of the seemingly unremarkable passenger. She noticed that the woman was now writing in a small notebook, carefully positioning her body to shield the content from view. When Zephyr approached to offer another beverage, the passenger closed the notebook smoothly. "How much longer until we begin descent, Ms. Kearney?" she asked casually. Zephyr froze momentarily. She had never introduced herself by last name to this passenger. The subtle confirmation that the woman had information she should not have sent Zephyr immediately back toward the cockpit. On the cabin monitors, Captain Harrington noticed the passenger tapping her finger on the armrest in a distinct pattern. His expression shifted from suspicion to shock as he recognized a military communication code. He translated silently, "Confirm package secure." Ellis, watching the captain's mounting distress, finally confronted the situation directly. "Sir, I am required to ask if you are fit to continue command." Harrington ignored the question, his attention completely focused on the passenger's tapping fingers, which had shifted to a new pattern that his mind automatically translated despite years away from military service. The tension escalated further when ground control issued a security alert due to their unauthorized course deviation. "Flight 1726, be advised we are initiating security protocol. Acknowledge." "Sir, they are scrambling intercept," Ellis warned urgently. "We need to respond." Harrington finally turned to his co-pilot, decision visible in his eyes. 6 years ago, I flew classified operations in Afghanistan. Call sign Reaper 1. Ellis stared at him, struggling to process this unexpected revelation. "The woman in 14C was my ground controller, Lieutenant Commander Lyra Astria." Harrington continued, each word carefully measured. "She died in a strike I piloted. I identified her remains personally." In the cabin, tension had spread beyond the cockpit. The businessman seated across from 14C finally confronted the passenger directly, his voice carrying clear agitation. "You are making everyone uncomfortable with your behavior, ma'am." The passenger's response came with unexpected military precision. "Return to your seat, civilian." Something in her tone, the absolute authority despite no visible rank or position, caused immediate compliance despite the businessman's obvious confusion. Zephyr witnessed the exchange and immediately reported to the cockpit via interphone. "Something is happening, Captain. The passenger just—" Her transmission cut off abruptly as the cabin interphone system failed, adding to the cascade of unusual technical issues affecting the aircraft. Within minutes, all communication systems began experiencing failures. Primary radio, backup systems, satellite links, all compromised simultaneously. "This is not mechanical failure," Ellis declared after checking systems. "Someone is jamming us." Harrington looked directly at the cabin camera. "She is isolating the aircraft." "Who is she, sir? Really?" Ellis demanded, professional composure fracturing under the extraordinary circumstances. Someone who knows things that got her killed, or supposedly killed. The cabin lights flickered momentarily before stabilizing, creating a wave of concerned murmurs throughout the aircraft. When the lighting returned to normal, the passenger in 14C was looking directly at the cockpit camera, holding up a small device clearly recognizable to Harrington as a military-grade communications disruptor. Understanding dawned on the captain's face, transforming his expression from suspicion to revelation. "My God," he whispered, "she is not here to expose me. She is trying to save me." "From what, sir?" Ellis asked, increasingly desperate for explanation, as the situation spiraled beyond his training. "From them," Harrington responded grimly as aircraft instruments detected approaching aircraft. The radar display showed military fighter jets moving into intercept position alongside their commercial flight. Ellis stared at the display in disbelief. But why would our own military want to intercept us? The fighter jets became visible through the cockpit windows, taking flanking positions on either side of the commercial airliner. Their presence created immediate alarm among passengers who could see them through the windows. Military radio channels suddenly activated despite the previous communications blackout. "Flight 1726, this is USAF Intercept. You are ordered to return to original flight plan immediately." Captain Harrington's expression hardened with decision, years of military and civilian experience crystallizing into a single moment of clarity. "First Officer Ellis, I am transferring command to you effective immediately." Ellis stared at him in shock. "Sir, this is highly irregular mid-flight." "So is having a dead woman on board who is trying to prevent something worse than 9/11, Harrington replied with grim certainty. Before Ellis could protest further, the captain activated the cockpit recording system with a command override. "This logs everything from now on. No one can erase it," he explained, then unlocked the cockpit door against all security protocols. Ellis made one final attempt to stop him. "Sir, this violates every security regulation." "Some regulations exist to prevent the truth, not protect it," Harrington responded, stepping into the cabin and moving directly towards seat 14C. His appearance in the passenger cabin created immediate concern. Passengers watched in confusion as their captain, who should have been flying the aircraft, walked purposefully down the aisle mid-flight. "Is something wrong with the plane?" a passenger asked nervously. "Why is not the pilot flying?" another questioned, anxiety spreading visibly through the cabin. Zephyr attempted to intercept him, professional training overriding her own confusion. "Sir, you need to return to the cockpit." "Official security matter, Ms. Kearney," Harrington stated with calm authority, bypassing her with the confidence of someone whose decision was already made. He stopped at row 14, looking directly at the passenger who had occupied. His thoughts since the first mysterious transmission. She met his gaze without surprise or confusion, neither challenging nor acknowledging him until he spoke. "Lieutenant Commander Astria," he said formally, using a military address that transformed the atmosphere instantly. "Captain Harrington," she responded, her voice now carrying clear military precision that had been absent in her previous interactions. Nearby passengers gasped at the exchange, witnessing the woman's entire demeanor shift from civilian to military without a single physical movement. What had been carefully disguised now became unmistakable, the bearing, the presence, the absolute command that no civilian clothing could fully conceal. "You are supposed to be dead," Harrington stated simply. That was the official story, she confirmed, neither apologetic nor triumphant. "Kandahar, Operation Nightshade. I saw the aftermath myself." "You saw what they wanted you to see, Captain." The mystery of the passenger's identity was resolved. She was indeed Lieutenant Commander Astria, Harrington's former ground controller, presumed dead for 6 years. But this revelation immediately planted two new questions. How had she survived an operation where Harrington had personally identified her remains, and what threat could be significant enough to justify her elaborate reappearance on this specific flight? The passenger, now clearly revealed as Lieutenant Commander Astria, removed a small device from her pocket, displaying a classified intelligence file that made Harrington's face pale further. "The operation was compromised from the beginning, not by enemy forces, by our own command." Through the windows, passengers could see the fighter jets maintaining their intercept position, creating a growing sense of alarm throughout the cabin. Astria continued her explanation with clinical precision, each word carrying the weight of 6 years of hidden truth. 3 days ago, they realized I was still alive. Every officer involved in Nightshade is being systematically eliminated. Why now, after 6 years? Harrington questioned. Because the evidence is about to become public. Senate Intelligence Committee, tomorrow morning. She showed him a second document that made his breath catch. Your name is on the elimination list, Captain. Flight 1726 is not meant to reach D.C. The urgent exchange between Harrington and Astria created a pocket of intense focus amid the growing panic in the cabin. Their conversation moved with the precision of military briefing, while around them, passengers reacted to the fighter jets visible through the windows. The cinematic rhythm shifted between their calm, controlled exchange and the escalating chaos surrounding them. They have been tracking me since Kabul, Astria continued, her voice level despite the extraordinary circumstances. I have stayed ahead of them, gathering evidence, building a case that could not be buried. Why not go directly to authorities? Harrington asked. The authorities are compromised at the highest levels. That is why I needed this flight. In this context, the aircraft itself became a symbolic motif transformed, no longer simply a vessel transporting passengers, but a contained battlefield where truth and deception fought for control. The sealed environment of the cabin, normally a space of mundane travel, had become a crucible where long-buried secrets would either be exposed or permanently silenced. The businessman who had confronted Astria earlier stood up, revealing a concealed weapon. Captain, step away from the passenger. Security Protocol Obsidian. Harrington recognized the Black Ops authorization code immediately, understanding flooding his expression. You are not Air Marshal. I outrank Air Marshal, Captain, the man stated coldly. Now return to cockpit and prepare for emergency landing. He is the enforcement team captain, Astria explained, remaining perfectly calm despite the weapon. Your flight was compromised before it took off. The situation escalated rapidly as more passengers throughout the cabin stood, revealing a coordinated team that had been strategically placed throughout the aircraft. Genuine passengers caught between these operatives realized something was terribly wrong, their fear palpable as the confrontation unfolded. First Officer Ellis's voice came over the intercom. Captain Harrington, we have military orders to divert to Andrews Air Force Base immediately. Harrington looked at Astria, the full scope of the operation becoming clear. They are going to disappear the entire flight, all witnesses. Just like they did with the others, she confirmed quietly. Throughout this escalation, Astria maintained a composed demeanor that conveyed quiet competence in the face of overwhelming threat. She did not raise her voice, make dramatic gestures, or display panic. Instead, her calm precision created natural empathy for her position, suggesting someone whose extraordinary skills had been honed through years of high-stakes operations. The aircraft cabin itself seemed to reflect the internal conflict taking place. Emergency lights activated intermittently as systems fluctuated, casting alternating patterns of normal illumination and red warning lights across the faces of passengers and operatives alike. The controlled environment designed for passenger comfort had become unstable, mirroring the breakdown of the official narrative that had kept Astria's truth buried for years. With decision made, Captain Harrington turned to address all passengers directly, his voice carrying the authority of both his position and his military experience. Ladies and gentlemen, this aircraft is under threat, not from terrorists but from elements within our own military. Shock rippled through the cabin as ordinary passengers registered the captain's words. The armed personnel moved to silence him, but Harrington continued despite their threats. Lieutenant Commander Astria is a decorated intelligence officer presumed dead after uncovering illegal black operations. She boarded this flight to prevent it from being used as cover for eliminating witnesses to war crimes. The armed team leader approached menacingly. Captain, you are interfering with a classified security operation. No, Harrington countered firmly. I am preventing the murder of 157 civilians to cover up crimes already committed. Genuine passengers, now fully aware of the extraordinary situation, began recording with phones despite the security team's attempts to stop them. A distinguished older man stood from his first-class seat. I am Senator Morrison's chief of staff. We are live streaming to his secure server right now. More passengers revealed unexpected identities: journalists, legal attachés, human rights observers. The realization dawned on the security team that the passenger manifest contained more strategic planning than they had anticipated. Each revelation provided new information for viewers to decode. The passenger manifest had not been random. Astria had specifically arranged for influential witnesses to be present on this flight, creating a situation where the truth could not be easily suppressed once exposed. The aircraft suddenly pitched slightly as First Officer Ellis implemented evasive maneuvers to maintain distance from the intercepting fighter jets. The movement created momentary instability in the cabin, causing passengers to grab seats and armrests. During this distraction, Astria made eye contact with several passengers who subtly nodded in response, revealing yet another layer of coordination that had been invisible until now. The silent, high-tension turning point arrived as the aircraft's main door, warning light activated unexpectedly. All eyes turned to the front of the cabin, where the indicator suggested imminent depressurization, an impossibility at cruising altitude unless deliberately triggered. In that moment of collective attention shift, Astria pressed a sequence on her communications device. Throughout the cabin, small receivers activated simultaneously on select passengers, their phones displaying identical messages. Without speaking, a dozen civilians moved with coordinated precision, positioning themselves strategically throughout the aircraft. The enforcement team leader noticed too late, realizing that what he had assumed was a single target operating alone was actually the visible point of a much larger operation. His expression transformed from confident control to dawning comprehension that he had severely underestimated the situation. Before he could react, the aircraft's communication systems suddenly restored, all frequencies simultaneously activating with the same transmission. Operation Daybreak initiated. Authentication code, Sierra Alpha 379. The enforcement team froze at the code, recognition visible on their faces. The team leader's expression collapsed into shock as he understood the full implications of what was happening. "That is a presidential override code," he whispered, weapon lowering involuntarily. "How did you—" "Not just the president," Astria stated calmly. "Joint Chiefs, NSA Director, and Senate Intelligence Committee. This flight is protected at the highest levels of government." As if confirming her words, the fighter jets visible through the windows suddenly changed formation, shifting from intercept positioning to protective escort. Their threatening presence transformed instantly into visible security. The external threat neutralized without a shot fired. The factual shock that ended the scene came when Astria stood, removing her civilian jacket to reveal what had been concealed beneath. Not a weapon or tactical gear as might have been expected, but instead the formal uniform insignia of Naval Intelligence with the distinctive markings of Deep Cover Operations Division, along with the Medal of Honor hanging at her throat. "Captain Harrington," she stated formally, "by the authority vested in me by Operation Daybreak, I hereby request your assistance in delivering classified testimony and evidence to the Senate Intelligence Committee, hearing scheduled for 0900 hours tomorrow morning." The enforcement team leader stared in disbelief at the medal and insignia. "That is not possible. You were declared killed in action." "That status," Astria replied with calm finality, "was the only way I could complete my mission." The revelation of Astria's official status sent shockwaves through the cabin. The enforcement team's weapons lowered in unison, their training insufficient preparation for confronting a presidential-level operation they had unknowingly opposed. "Stand down immediately," their leader ordered, recognizing the futility of resistance. Authentication code confirmed. The operatives who had been poised throughout the cabin disarmed themselves with practiced efficiency, placing weapons on empty seats with deliberate visibility. What had been a covert enforcement operation transformed into visible surrender before the passengers' bewildered eyes. Captain Harrington responded to Astria with formal precision, matching her military bearing. "Request acknowledged and granted, Commander. This aircraft and its crew are at your disposal." Harrington turned to the enforcement team leader, authority now radiating from his posture. "Your team will remain seated and under observation for the duration of this flight. Any attempt to interfere will be treated as direct violation of presidential orders. Am I clear?" "Yes, sir," came the subdued response. With immediate threats neutralized, Astria activated her communication device again. "Daybreak Command, this is Viper Actual. Situation secure. proceeding to destination with escort. The response came through speakers throughout the cabin, allowing all passengers to hear, "Confirmed, Viper actual, Senate. Committee has been notified of your approach. Military escort will remain in formation until landing. Extraction team standing by at Reagan National." The pacing accelerated as coordination rippled through the aircraft. Civilian passengers who had revealed themselves as part of Astria's network began organizing others, explaining the situation with calm professionalism that transformed panic into cautious cooperation. "Ladies and gentlemen," one announced, revealing a Justice Department credential, "what you are witnessing is the culmination of a 6-year deep cover operation to expose military intelligence corruption. Your safety has been guaranteed at the highest levels of government. We apologize for the alarm, but your presence as witnesses is vital to national security." First Officer Ellis's voice came over the intercom, steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "This is your first officer speaking. We have resumed our original flight plan to Reagan National under military escort. Our estimated arrival time is unchanged. Captain Harrington will return to the cockpit shortly." Throughout the cabin, the aircraft's communication screens activated simultaneously, displaying an official military channel broadcast. The presidential seal appeared briefly before being replaced by a live feed from the Pentagon. A general in full-dress uniform addressed the cabin directly. "This is General Marshall, Joint Chiefs of Staff. To all passengers on Flight 1726, you are now part of Operation Daybreak, a classified counterintelligence mission. Every person aboard has been vetted and selected. You will be debriefed upon landing and are required to maintain confidentiality regarding specific details until formal declassification." The public revelation continued building as the general continued. "To the enforcement team aboard, your mission parameters were falsified by compromised command elements. You have been operating under invalid orders. Surrender all communication devices and weapons to Commander Astria's team immediately." As this announcement concluded, Astria stood in the center aisle, transforming the commercial aircraft into an impromptu briefing room. The lighting stabilized, emergency systems reset to normal operation. The symbolic motif of the aircraft received its visual payoff. What had begun as a vulnerable, isolated space became a secure platform for truth. The very containment that threatened to conceal, now ensuring that testimony would reach its intended destination. 6 years ago, Astria began, addressing the entire cabin. Operation Nightshade was deployed as a counter-terrorism mission to neutralize high-value targets in Kandahar. What Captain Harrington and his flight crew were not told was that the true objective was eliminating American intelligence assets who had discovered evidence of illegal weapons sales to non-state actors. She activated a tablet that projected classified documents onto the main cabin screens. These files contain evidence of senior military officials orchestrating the murder of our own intelligence personnel to conceal their involvement in weapons trafficking worth billions of dollars. Captain Harrington stood beside her, adding his perspective. "I was the pilot assigned to that mission. I was told I was delivering strike teams to eliminate terrorist cells. Instead, I was used to transport assassination teams targeting our own people. When I discovered the truth," Astria continued, "I became a target myself. My death was staged during an extraction operation. Captain Harrington was shown remains identified as mine, complete with DNA confirmation. The power reversal completed itself cleanly as Astria moved through the cabin. Where minutes earlier the enforcement team had commanded fear and compliance, now they sat under guard by civilian passengers revealed as federal agents. The formerly anonymous passenger from 14C had transformed into the commanding center of the operation, her authority acknowledged by military escort outside the windows and federal personnel within. "What changed?" a passenger asked. "Why expose everything now, after 6 years?" 3 days ago, they found me," Astria explained. "A security breach compromised my location in Kabul. Rather than run, I activated the final phase of Operation Daybreak. Every person on this flight was selected for a specific purpose. Journalists to document, legal experts to verify, government officials to witness, and civilians whose backgrounds make you unimpeachable witnesses." She looked directly at Captain Harrington. "Including a pilot with an impeccable record and personal connection to the original operation." As understanding dawned across the faces of those aboard, The chaos and tension that had filled the cabin began transitioning to clarity and purpose. Fear gave way to comprehension as passengers realized they were not victims of a security threat, but participants in a carefully orchestrated operation years in the making. Captain Harrington excused himself to return to the cockpit, his responsibility to the aircraft and passengers remaining his first duty despite the extraordinary circumstances. As he moved toward the front of the cabin, passengers who had earlier watched him with confusion or fear now regarded him with new understanding and respect. In the cockpit, First Officer Ellis looked up as Harrington returned to his seat. "Sir, I just received full confirmation from Air Traffic Control. We have priority clearance all the way to Reagan National." "Thank you, Mr. Ellis," Harrington replied, settling into his position with the practiced ease of thousands of flights. "I apologize for the unorthodox situation." "No need, sir," Ellis responded, a new respect evident in his voice. "It is an honor to be part of this flight." As they began descent procedures, the fighter escort maintained perfect formation alongside, transformed from threat to protection. Through the cockpit windows, the lights of Washington, D.C. appeared on the horizon, the capital city's landmarks illuminated against the night sky. Back in the main cabin, Astria had finished her briefing and now moved through the aircraft, speaking quietly with key witnesses about the testimony that would be required in the coming days. The mood had shifted entirely, the tension of confrontation replaced by the subdued anticipation of justice long delayed but finally within reach. A senior citizen seated near the front called Astria over as she passed. "My son was intelligence, killed in Afghanistan in 2017. They told us it was insurgents." Astria knelt beside his seat, her voice softening from command to compassion. "What was his name?" "Lieutenant James Rawlins, communications specialist." Recognition flickered in Astria's eyes. "He was stationed at Forward Operating Base Condor. He intercepted the weapons manifests that started this investigation." "You knew him?" the man asked, hope and grief mingling in his voice. "I worked with him. His information saved countless lives, sir. He was a hero who deserved better than the lie you were told." "Will the truth come out now? All of it?" "That is why I am here," Astria promised. "That is why we are all here." As the aircraft began its final approach, reflection replaced tension throughout the cabin. Passengers processed what they had witnessed, the extraordinary revelation settling into understanding of their unexpected role in an operation spanning years and continents. Zephyr moved through the cabin securing items for landing, her routine duties continuing despite the transformed context. When she reached Astria's row, she paused. "I never would have guessed," she said quietly. "You seemed so ordinary when you boarded." "That was the point," Astria replied with the first hint of a smile since the flight began. "The best disguise is being forgettable." "How did you live undercover for so long?" Zephyr asked. 6 years believing everyone thought you were dead." "One day at a time," Astria answered simply. "With purpose." The landing gear deployed with its characteristic hydraulic sound, the aircraft descending through clouds toward Reagan National. As they broke through the cloud cover, passengers could see the airport surrounded by security vehicles, lights flashing across the tarmac. A substantial reception awaited their arrival. In these final moments of flight, Captain Harrington's voice came over the intercom, mirroring his announcement from takeoff, but carrying entirely new meaning. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final approach to Reagan National Airport. Weather on the ground is clear, temperature 64 degrees. We anticipate a smooth landing." He paused before adding, "It has been an honor to serve as your captain on this historic flight. On behalf of the crew, thank you for your courage and composure during extraordinary circumstances." The aircraft touched down precisely on schedule, rolling smoothly along the runway before taxiing toward a cordoned-off section of the terminal where numerous official vehicles waited. Unlike standard arrivals where passengers would disembark into the anonymity of a busy airport, this flight would be met with the full acknowledgement of its significance. As the aircraft came to its final stop, Astria stood by the main cabin door alongside Captain Harrington, the conclusion of their journey together mirroring its beginning, but with complete transformation. Where once they had been captain and anonymous passenger, now they stood as equals and collaborators in an operation that would change military accountability forever. "Captain Harrington," Astria said quietly, "I want to apologize for involving you without consent. Your flight was chosen because I needed someone I could trust when the moment came. How could you know I would help? He asked. After believing for 6 years I had been part of a legitimate operation? Because I knew you in Kandahar, she replied simply. I coordinated 37 missions with you as Reaper 1. You never cut corners, never accepted vague intelligence, never took unnecessary risks with your team. You were exactly who I needed today. The moral resonance of her words emphasized the story's central truth. That character revealed in small, unobserved decisions eventually defines the crucial moments of crisis and choice. Harrington's routine excellence in his duty had made him the essential component of Astria's plan, though he had never known he was being observed and evaluated. As the cabin door opened, the bright lights of camera flashes and official spotlights flooded the aircraft interior. Astria straightened her uniform, the Medal of Honor catching the light as she prepared to step forward into the public revelation that would complete her mission. "Ready, Captain?" she asked. "After you, Commander," he responded with formal respect. Together they emerged from the aircraft into the waiting media presence, the culmination of Operation Daybreak, unfolding as Astria had planned for 6 years. Behind them, the passengers followed, each selected for their credibility and influence, each now a witness to history being corrected after years of deliberate distortion. Senate Intelligence Committee members waited on the tarmac alongside Justice Department officials and military personnel loyal to the Constitution rather than compromised command structures. The presence of these authorities validated Astria's claims even before formal testimony could begin. The visible support, suggesting how deeply her evidence had already penetrated the highest levels of government. As dawn broke over Washington, D.C., the following morning, Captain Harrington stood at the window of a secure government facility, watching aircraft take off and land at Reagan National. Each flight represented hundreds of lives, passengers trusting their safety to pilots and systems they would never fully know or understand. The weight of that responsibility felt different now, transformed by his experience with Flight 1726. Behind him, television news played continuous coverage of the developing story. Senate hearings begin today, following shocking revelations about Operation Nightshade and the alleged cover-up of American intelligence personnel deaths in Afghanistan. The door opened as Astria entered, now dressed in formal military attire, appropriate for congressional testimony. Her transformation from anonymous passenger to key witness in a historical accountability process was complete. "They are ready for us," she said simply. As they walked together toward the hearing room, Harrington voiced the question that had lingered since her revelation on the aircraft. "After your testimony is complete, after the hearings conclude, what happens to Commander Astria?" She considered his question thoughtfully before responding. "She completed her mission. Perhaps she can finally rest." "And then?" "I do not know," she admitted. "For 6 years, this has been my only purpose. I have not considered what comes after." "You could return to flying," he suggested. "Commercial aviation always needs good pilots with attention to detail." For the first time, Astria smiled fully, the weight of her mission lifting enough to reveal the person beneath the operative. "Perhaps I could. I have extensive experience with difficult passengers." They paused outside the hearing room doors, the culmination of years of sacrifice and determination waiting on the other side. Astria straightened her uniform one final time, Medal of Honor prominent against the dark fabric, the visible symbol of extraordinary service performed away from public recognition. "Whatever you choose," Harrington said, "it has been an honor to serve with you, twice." "The honor was mine, Captain," she replied formally, then added with quiet sincerity, "Thank you for believing me when it mattered most." The doors opened to reveal a packed hearing room, cameras positioned to broadcast the proceedings to a nation about to learn how far some would go to conceal truth, and how far others would go to preserve it. Astria stepped forward into the light, her posture straight, her purpose clear, her mission nearly complete. Behind her, Captain Harrington watched with quiet pride as the passenger from seat 14C prepared to change the course of military accountability forever. The anonymous woman who had boarded his flight, hands steady, purpose hidden, walked toward the witness table with the same quiet determination that had sustained her through 6 years of solitary mission. The truth had finally found its way home. Have you ever encountered someone whose quiet dedication to what is right transformed your understanding of courage, someone who carried a burden silently, not for recognition or reward, but because principles mattered more than personal comfort. True heroism rarely announces itself with dramatic gestures or public acclaim. Instead, it reveals itself in persistent commitment to truth and justice, especially when no one else may ever know the price that was paid.